Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you listeners know how much this year I've been arguing that we need to step out of just thinking like an entrepreneur and step into thinking like a CEO, a true chief executive in our businesses, which means we've got to wear that leadership label. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, because this is someone who understands leadership at a really core level, who combines not just real world applications of it, but I so appreciate her academic and research perspective on leadership, because this is someone who's very intentional about the things that she sees and the things that she helps other leaders achieve. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Kelly Kienzle. Kelly is a leadership development specialist who uses data-backed assessments and research-proven coaching methods to help leaders challenge old thinking and discover new ways in which to view themselves and to lead. She has coached over 400 leaders across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and she's led dozens of retreats and workshops. Her background includes a master's degree in organizational development, a coaching certification from Georgetown University, and almost 20 years of managing professional development at McKinsey & Co., as well as other firms. We are all going to learn a lot. I know that you're not just going to love the things that Kelly shares with us today, but also the energy and the passion through which she brings that stuff, because it's so clear to me that she views the real possibility in all of us as business owners, as entrepreneurs, to be those leaders, not just for our teams, but for our industries, for ourselves, for our businesses. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Kelly Kienzle. All right, Kelly, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here and have this conversation.
Heck yeah. So we're going to get into a lot of good stuff. So before we do that, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Kelly? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
So I would say that I would describe myself as a recovering English major. I graduated with that degree many, many years ago and made my way into the professional development sector. And at some point, I recognized that in order to really develop as leaders in our organizations, we needed a tailored approach. And so I shifted to focusing just on developing leaders. And that has made all the difference in terms of how I think about my own development, but also how I see the similarities and differences between other leaders and how they develop.
Yeah, it's a fun overview, especially because it ties in. You and I couldn't help ourselves. We got to some of the good stuff before we even hit record, just in our off-air conversation. And what I think gives you such an interesting vantage point for today's conversation is, obviously, you've worked in the corporate world. You've seen leadership at all different levels, but you're also one of us. You're also a fellow entrepreneur and business owner. And so I think that, and I see it as the host of this show, I think that there's a shift in the air where people are starting to recognize that leadership is a skill. Leadership is a field that we all have to master. It's something that we can't ignore. Sure, a lot of people want to talk about marketing, they want to talk about sales, they want to talk about branding, all these other things, but why is leadership? Why is that such an important component that we're starting to recognize? The corporate world has recognized it for a long time, but in a world of AI, when other people are leaning on tools, it's that human element that we keep coming back to. What is it that's so special about leadership?
Well, I think that in addition to leadership being a skill and a field, as you described, it's also a mindset. My belief is that every one of us can and should be a leader. And in the current climate with AI and with the advent of more specialized roles, having a person that steps forward to be that leader across those various specialists and who brings that human element that AI will never, I'm assuming, be able to do. I think that is why there is a newfound emphasis on developing this leadership mindset.
Yeah, that with that in mind, Kelly, part of what I teased in today's episode is that you not only bring the real world application to it, but that academic, that research, that data backed component to it. I personally know that some of what you've been doing recently is some research on the top 3 challenges that leaders are facing in this time of change. We can't have this conversation without talking about the more macro landscape of how quickly things are changing. What's that research revealing on your end, Kelly?
Several things. So, as background, I did a in-depth process of interviewing leaders across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And there were 3 clear themes that emerged across sectors, across genders, and across tenure of leadership. And they were divided into what people are feeling now, and what people want to get to instead, their desired future state. So I'll briefly highlight those, and then I have tools that I can offer to help people move from that, what they're feeling now to the desired future state of what they want. So in terms of what people are feeling now, leaders across the board said, not surprisingly, a lot of confusion and ambiguity, right? There's a lack of clarity on where to go forward and how to get there. I think as a result, the second theme emerged, which is that there's a lot of reactivity and firefighting, right? When we are confused, we're often caught back on our heels and we end up going into a reactive stance and firefighting the most intense flames that, pop up that day, which of course pulls on us and I think leads to what I discovered as the third common theme across leaders, which is exhaustion and burnout, right? We can't be caught back on our heels day after day, month after month, right? We can't be constantly fighting the little fires that pop up because it leaves us drained, not just physically, but emotionally, right? It's not very satisfying to always be in a state of confusion and firefighting. So those 3 themes clearly emerged as where people stood. So I asked them, well, given the current climate, given what is happening now at the regional and national and global levels, where do you want to get to, right? Knowing what is within your control, does that desired future state look like where you feel you can be the leader that you want to be? And what emerged from there was, well, instead of confusion and ambiguity, I want to get back to clarity, because clarity gives me confidence. Clarity and confidence was that first theme that leaders identified, that if they could have that clarity, it would give them the confidence to move forward and come up off their heels and lean more proactively into achieving whatever their organization's mission or goals are. That was the first theme of where they wanted to get to. The second theme of what they most wanted was to be proactive and show strategic leadership, right? They wanted to move from reaction to being intentional, more forward-thinking leadership, because again, that kind of intellectual and meaningful leadership, where we're thinking about our strategy as opposed to firefighting, is far more fulfilling to us. And it results in that third state of what they most wanted, which was to feel energized and supported. And by energized, it's getting that feeling back that, you're back in your game again. You're back in control of doing what you most want to do. And you're feeling supported by it, because a footnote to this, it's not just the leaders that are experiencing exhaustion and burnout, but their teams are as well. And when your team is losing energy, you lose energy as well, right? We all know that leaders not only give energy to their teams, but they also feed off of energy from their teams. There's a virtuous cycle there. So those were the 3 desired future states of where leaders wanted to get to: clarity and confidence, proactivity with strategic leadership, and feeling energized and supported. So Let me pause there and hear your
Kelly,
reaction.
you say pause, but I'm going to have to kick it right back to you because there's 500 different directions I want to go in, but I don't want to gloss over the fact that you've tied those to tangible tools. And obviously these are things that you work through with your clients. What do those tools look like? Because these are lofty ambitions, all of these things that you're sharing with us. And that's why we're going to go deeper into them. But all of these things are easy to talk about, not so easy to achieve. What do those tools look like on our roadmap to getting there?
Sure. So there are 3 tools. The first tool is perhaps the most important because it underpins all of them. And it's something that I call finding your chaos values. So your chaos values are those values that you turn to when in the midst of chaos, right? We all have a long, fairly long list of values that are meaningful to us that we pull up at different times depending on the environment that we're in. When we are in an environment of chaos or uncertainty, there are certain values then that we turn to. For example, I often turn to a value of commitment and steadfastness when I'm in a situation of chaos. I want to make sure that I am committed and steadfast to my clients' needs during that time, because that is a value that anchors me. As another example, I had another leader. He identified his chaos values as transparency, because for him, being transparent during times of chaos helped him feel grounded and more certain of what was true. And he knew that that was true for his team as well, if he could exhibit and walk the talk of transparency. So my first suggestion, my first tool would be to get clear on not just what are your values as a leader, but what are your values as a leader in times of chaos. That's the first tool. The second tool is one that will help us move up and away from the uncertainty and reactivity that is happening around us by adopting a mindset called going up on the balcony. Going on the balcony was a mindset that was defined by Ronald Heifetz back at Harvard, I think back in the late 90s. I think it still holds true today. And what it says is that leaders should make a habit of occasionally but regularly going up on the balcony where they can get a broader view of what is happening down on the stage, where all of the action and the reactivity is happening. Because when we are down on the stage, we are often caught up in the emotional fray and tumult of all that is happening there, all the characters around us and the small dramas that they each are going through. And it can be very difficult for us as leaders to get a clear picture of how we want to shift this cast of characters to a positive outcome for the end of this act, let's say. To do that, it helps to go up on the balcony and get some emotional remove from all that is going on, yet we are still able to see what is happening. And then we can observe, we see how, these two characters over here are in a conflict. And so we'll, when we go back down to the balcony, we'll need to address that. Or we can see how the actions, taken by another group are not going to lead to the outcome that we want. We have not only a wider scope, but a calmer view of what is happening. And then we go back down to the stage again, right? Because a leader also needs to be in the mix of what is happening. So the key message on this tool of going up on the balcony is build your agility to move back and forth from the stage to the balcony so that you live both perspectives and have both sets of data from those two different perspectives. So that's tool number 2 on, and that addresses managing this reactivity and lack of strategic planning and leadership. The third tool that I want to offer up is to address this need of exhaustion and burnout, and our teams feeling that exhaustion as well. And This tool is something that I call the magic delegation question. And the magic delegation question is asking yourself, what am I, as the leader, uniquely qualified to do? What am I, as the leader, uniquely qualified to do? And whatever your answer is to that question, that is what you focus on. That is your top priority. Because if only you can do it, if only you are uniquely qualified to do those things, then that is what you must do. Everything else, see if you can delegate that to others. Because clearly it is something that others can do, right? It's not something that you are uniquely qualified to do. It's something that others can do. And it is often true that those tasks are growth opportunities for your team members because it is something they have not done before or they have not done to that level. And so you achieve two goals in one move. You stay focused on the most important priorities that only you can do, and you give growth opportunities to your team so they can continue to grow into the leaders that they are becoming as well. So that's the overview of the three tools: the chaos values, going on the balcony, and the magic delegation question.
Gosh, Kelly, I love the way you've laid that out, and the fact that not only have you shared it with us, but I would argue it's incredibly actionable. That's what I really appreciate about those three tools is, listeners, fortunately for all of you, there's a rewind button on any podcast player. Go back and listen to these. Kelly isn't saying these things just because it's fun to talk about in theory and from an academic perspective. It's actionable. It's meant for you to actually implement it. And so go back, ask yourself those questions, utilize those tools that Kelly just laid out for us. But Kelly, I'm going to go to the first objection that I would imagine a listener might have, which is, okay, when I hear you talk about things like, I love the theater analogy of removing myself from the stage and going to the balcony and having the ability to zoom in and zoom out and see those things. And most importantly, you called out, remove a lot of the emotion from it when we go up to that balcony. Some listeners might think, and I'm sure there's a lot of mindset objectives or obstacles in the leadership world, but some people might think, that's not me. I'm not good at that. That's not how I was made. I wasn't born to be somebody who can do that. And even if we zoom way out in leadership, some people talk about, oh, that person is a leader, as if it's a fixed trait, as if someone was born with it. Talk to us about that, because it's so clear to me that you believe in the evolution and the development of these skills. What's your approach to that when people do have those limiting beliefs?
Absolutely. To question those beliefs and see how much they are in service of where you are now. We develop beliefs and stories for certain reasons, and they probably make sense at the time that we develop them. But that doesn't mean that they continue to be in service of us as we evolve. So let me give you an example based on the point that you made, Brian, about there are some leaders who say, that's just not me. I can't, emotionally remove myself from my team. Well, what gets in the way of that, right? Is it something about being, fiercely dedicated to your team and, you can feel what they're feeling? Okay, great. Take that and then recognize how going up to the balcony for just a few minutes would be in service of your team. How would it help them for you to be removed for a moment? It's like the example of, if you are in a plane and there is some sort of, small mechanical malfunction, you do not want to hear the pilot get on the intercom in a panicked voice and tell you, yes, I'm sure you're all quite, nervous and worried about what's happening right now. No, you don't want him or her to have reflect your emotions in the moment. You want to hear a calm, steady voice describing what is happening and what they're going to do to fix it. Same thing here as a leader, right? When you can step back and have, for just a few minutes, an emotional remove from it so that you can see clearly, you will be able to deliver a better solution. And then you will still, I guarantee, if you are an empath, you are still going to communicate your empathy and concern for your team in your voice and what you do. So it becomes a both and. You are both seeing the overall strategic view while also staying empathetically connected enough to your team.
Yeah, I love that answer, especially because as someone who interviews so many incredible leaders and entrepreneurs and founders like I do, it's that and thinking that you just alluded to. The and thinking is such a powerful mindset trait to adopt into our thinking, because most of the time it's not this or this. You know, we can encompass all of that. I can be passionate and very emotional and also learn to remove myself from the situation. So I really appreciate those insights, Kelly. I want to go back though, because I always just think with my listener cap on, I'm just like, what would I be thinking if I was a listener and I could ask the guest a question today? And part of that is I want to go right back to the chaos that you've talked so much about, because business leaders, whether they're working inside of a company or whether they're working for their own company and inside their own company, they're busy. It's chaotic. Life is crazy, not just business, but Kelly, you get it. You're a mom. I mean, there's so many different responsibilities that we all have. How many of those leaders that you work with, and how do you help them navigate when they say, I'm just too busy to think about this stuff. I am just reacting. There's so much going on. I would argue, and I'm sure it's part of your pitch, that you can't afford not to pay attention to this stuff when it's chaotic. But how do you help people to make sense of these things and invest in themselves in this way amidst the chaos?
Yes, I do get that question a lot, because a lot of leaders are facing this right now. And so, what I talk about is, well, who is driving the ship, right? If you are below decks, right, working on, trying to put out every little fire that comes up, who's manning the wheel up top and steering the ship? And the answer is usually no one. I'm like, well, then that's you, right? Then let's invest in how you remain up on the deck, right, steering the ship, occasionally coming down, still coming down occasionally to see what is happening with your team. But yes, leaders can't afford to not invest in this now, because their teams are looking to them for that kind of stalwart, steady, guiding hand here. And that often speaks to a leader because they don't want to be firefighting. They don't want to be swept up in the chaos. There's a huge feeling of vulnerability and powerlessness when we get swept up into the chaos. But if we can zoom in on what is within our circle of control, and even within our circle of influence, that can be not just reassuring for us, but allow us to very strategically point to where they want to go next. So this idea of circle of influence and circle of control, like what can you? I would often ask my clients, what is within your control here? What is within your influence? And we start working from that point of strength and certainty to get the ground under their feet again and out of that sense of chaos.
Yeah, I love that, especially because it really alludes to something that I've just embraced over my 18-year entrepreneurial career, and that is reps and practice. And none of these things that you and I are talking about today, nothing we ever talk about on a podcast or inside of a book or anywhere, none of that is going to instantly be mastered by any of us. It is that practice. And that's why I often think about and chuckle at that Zig Ziglar quote where he said, people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. And it's something that if people are expecting, I want to become motivated, I want to become inspired, it's not going to last. Nothing ever lasts. We have to keep doing it. How does leadership play into that? Is leadership also a practice? Are there things that we should be doing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly that we should be reflecting on? I'm super curious to hear about how we embed this into our normal workflows to keep these skills sharp and always developing.
Yes. So there is a mindset that I share with my clients called the growth edge. And I urge them to always be finding their growth edge. The growth edge is that place where we can just barely do the thing and it's still hard, right? It is a challenge. We are pushing ourselves to do it, but we are just able to do it. And if we push ourselves to that growth edge, then we will always be learning something new. We will always be pushing ourselves to our potential, but not so far that we are burning ourselves out or we are letting others down and missing our targets. So that would be one of my key overall mindsets, is to talk with my client about, where is their growth edge on any particular skill, right? There are, 3 to 5 to 25 different skills involved in leadership. And each one of those skills has a different growth edge for each person. And I would argue, if that person is investing in their leadership growth, that growth edge is shifting, every, few experiences that they have as a leader, because they are recognizing that their learning is dynamic and their growth edge is always moving a little further out.
Yeah. Kelly, I want to ask you this question. I'll share something from my world as well. Is obviously AI is just a force that everybody wants to talk about, and rightly so. It is this very powerful tool that can support us in so many different ways. I'm super curious to hear your perspective on how AI can help us as leaders, because full transparency for me, because leadership is one of those things that I'm focusing on. One thing that I really like to do is all of our internal meetings, I take the transcript from it. I always have an AI note taker present at my meetings, and I plug it into AI and I say, hey, I want to get better as a leader. What do you observe? What are those things that you see? Is there something I missed? Is there something I didn't hear or didn't acknowledge? Is there things that I can do to improve as a leader? And AI serves as that mostly objective person, if you will, but mostly objective tool that can look at things through a lens through which maybe I couldn't have if I was just solo trying to assess it. What are some of those ways that you're seeing AI support leaders? Because I feel like it is a very powerful tool we can take advantage of.
It is, and I think it's not unlike growth edge in that I think each leader, each person is has the opportunity to decide how they want to use AI for themselves. The general guidance that I've been talking with my leaders about is, how do you want to use AI in a way that supports you, but also still brings it back into the human world? Because AI is a fabulous tool, yet it is only a tool. And so they often take an approach similar to yours, where they might put a question into AI, see what the response is, and then have an active, intellectual debate with either myself or their team about, okay, this was the answer I got back. How well does this actually fit in with who I am, with the situation that I'm facing, with the goals that I want our organization or team to achieve? So they're still applying that human analytical thought, yet doing it with the support of this tool that is here to stay. So let's find a way for it to integrate in a supportive way into our lives.
I really like that twist you just brought to it, Kelly. I feel like that's that next step there, is to bring it back to the humans, because that's why I said mostly objective in there, is I know that my ChatGPT loves to fluff me up, loves to make me feel good about all the things, but you're right, bringing it back ultimately to the people that matter, the people that we're serving, the people that we're leading. That's the important work that we all get to do, and having someone like you in our corner is a powerful asset in our growth journeys. So Kelly, I knew that time would fly by with you today, and I'm particularly excited to see how you answer this last question, because I ask it of every single guest that comes on the show, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that not only are you a subject matter expert, as you've put on display for us today, but you're one of us, you are a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with?
Well, I would like to leave with the comment that I briefly made at the opening, which is that every one of us can and should be a leader. By my definition, a leader is simply the person who notices that something needs to happen and takes the first step to make it happen. If you do those two things, you are a leader. And whether you do them at a global organizational scale with tens of thousands of employees under you, or whether you do that in your own business as a solopreneur, pushing it forward, that makes you a leader. And adopting that leadership mindset will then allow the leadership actions and results to follow. So that would be my advice.
Kelly, that might be my favorite definition ever of a leader. I've heard leadership defined in so many different ways, but yours also is an aspirational definition because we can step into that. Gosh, the fact that you brought it down to 2 steps, we can all do those 2 steps. And it really reminds me, clearly I'm a sucker for quotes, that Martin Luther King Jr. quote where he said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take that first step." And so often it's such a powerful thing for us to really embrace as part of our psyche and part of our leadership, in the fact that we can take that first step. We can be that change agent, and that in and of itself will often inspire others to come with us. So Kelly, you have got me all fired up about stepping even more into a leadership role, and I'm excited for people to check out your work and all the great stuff that you're doing alongside your clients. So for listeners who want to find you online, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Great. So you can contact me on my website, which is opencirclecoaching.com. That's opencirclecoaching.com. And find me on LinkedIn as well under my name. So I look forward to crossing paths with any of you then.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. You don't have to worry about spelling, don't have to worry about remembering anything. If you're on the go or if you're driving, we're dropping those links down below in the show notes. No matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, you'll find a direct link to Kelly's business website as well as a link to her personal LinkedIn. So if you want to continue the conversation, don't be shy. Most people hesitate to jump in and start taking control of their future and changing their lives and their businesses. So don't be shy. Check out those links down below. Otherwise, Kelly, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
I've absolutely loved every minute of it, Brian. Thank you so much.